about. We're talking
Okay.
about a manager asking employees, like, what are you doing? Like, what have you been doing
Yeah.
last week?
Yeah.
Federal
Time out,
employees do not
guys.
have, federal employees do not have, it shouldn't be.
Andy's lost
these,
total control of the show.
Well, that's okay.
I know. I'm going to
These are
ask
not-
you. I want
These
to
are
talk
not,
about.
wait, these are
You're gonna
not.
shut off your mic, Carl.
These are not life.
Welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for Monday, February 24th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm joined by RCP President and co-founder Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. Gentlemen, Elon Musk sent an email to federal employees asking what they do in a week, and their responses are due today, Monday. There's been a mixed response from federal agencies, with some departments telling their employees not to respond to Musk's email. So, Carl, what do you make of this request for an accounting of your past week?
Well, the deadline is 8:59 p.m., so almost midnight on Monday night. This went out Saturday. You know, an organization that wants to take stock of what its employees are doing, that's a healthy thing. This was not that. This was an unhealthy thing. It was one step above trolling, really. And Elon Musk followed it up with tweets over the weekend saying a failure to respond would be considered a resignation, which the original email didn't say that, and that's patently illegal anyway. But it was, it wasn't a good faith effort to try and do what President Trump and Elon Musk say they're trying to do, which is make sure that the federal workforce is working and that they're efficient and that the United States isn't spending taxpayers' dollars unwisely. There are ways to do that, but that wasn't this. This was the tone was insulting. It was demeaning. I know people who got it. He couldn't even be bothered to write a grammatical sentence. The word approximately is abbreviated, which I'd never seen before. There's no sense who this goes to, or what person is going to read 2.3 million responses. And of course, it went to agencies that had no business going to: the CIA, the FBI, Justice Department. These people are working on confidential things that they're not allowed legally to put in an email. And Kash Patel pushed back. The FBI said, "Well, no, we're not going to do that. We'll go through. We'll do this the proper way."
Why do you think it was not a good faith effort, Carl? I mean, how would this have been done that would have been acceptable to you?
Well,
because you say it's a good thing. So,
Tom, as you know, I manage people, not 2.3 million people, but and I think, and you could ask our current colleagues, Tom, or anybody who used to work for me. I believe that you should treat people who work for you with respect. So let's start with that. It was disrespectful. The tone was snotty. There's this idea, and Elon Musk and President Trump have talked about that the federal workforce is full of people who don't even come to work and don't do anything. If I'm prepared to accept that there are people like that, and they should find them and try and figure out how to get them to leave. But this was, let's just start with this. It was utterly disrespectful.
But Carl, just if you were coming in and you were trying to take a sort of benchmark of an organization, whether it's 2.3 million or 23, it doesn't really matter. I'm just having trouble with the idea that this is disrespectful to ask somebody what they did in the past week and to sort of document it in a couple bullet points. It seems to me an innocuous question that any McKinsey consultant or anyone would come in. It seems fairly standard to me. So
I don't, Andy, I know you're sincere, but I think if you were on the receiving email, a recipient of that email in any organization you work, you'd have a very different reaction.
I don't know.
You don't know. You don't know who it came from. You don't know where the information goes. It's this, and it went to everybody irrespective. They weren't really asking people what they do. They were trying to get people to quit. If you wanted to actually do that, you'd go to the manager. First of all, you'd start at the cabinet level. You've got these agencies. You've just installed a cabinet of your choosing. You've picked every single person to head every agency. Donald Trump got all of his people, including people that his own party thought were unqualified or underqualified, but they went with this. They said, you know what? He won the election. He won it decisively. He gets to choose his own government. That's where you'd start. You'd go to these agency heads, the cabinet people you've just named, and you'd ask them to do some of this, and they would go down to their managers, and it would be done in a more respectful, in a more orderly, in a more productive way. This Department of Government Efficiency is so inefficient itself that it's become a parody. So that's my response to what you said, Andy, and I'm prepared to take flack from Tom now.
Well, I'm prepared to give you some because I mean, look, I just this idea that the Democrats are defending and the media are defending, and Carl, you're part of the media, I guess, but like
I'm part of the media.
that somehow federal workers are some, protected class that can't be asked what they're doing, and probational workers can't be fired. Stuff like this goes on every single day in the private sector, and the media doesn't write. Thousands of people get laid off. They just got laid off from Southwest Airlines and from Meta and from all these other places, and the media doesn't sit down and write stories about like, oh, so and so worried about what they're going to do next, and there's a lot of anxiety, and oh my gosh, like maybe they should be doing that, but they don't do that. And employees all around America, private employees, are getting audited all the time. They get asked like, what are you doing? This is not some crazy idea. Maybe it wasn't executed properly or to the, stylistically the way you'd like it, Carl, but I agree with Anna. This is not some radical, crazy idea. And I just, it's as if like federal workers somehow, they can't be held to the same standard that private employees can be.
You are both completely wrong. but Tom.
Oh, and by the way, one more point before I forget.
Yeah.
I'm going to forget this because
okay, go ahead.
This previous administration, there's all this talk about like, oh, the purge at the DOD and all. And we're cutting people willy-nilly. Carl, you used that phrase there. Oh, and we're going to cut people that are actually doing important things. The previous administration wholesale fired thousands and thousands and thousands of employees without knowing who they were. All they know is they didn't take the vaccine. Therefore, they could not be employed. Didn't matter if you were man in the nuclear codes or wiping the floor at the Defense Department, you were out of a job, and the media didn't give a shit.
Well, Tom, I thought that was horrible and said so on our show. So but I wasn't. Wait. I wasn't.
Not for that reason, Carl.
Yeah. I don't.
All right.
Wait. One last point here.
Okay.
Tom and you, Andy, have both compared this to the private sector. I have written, and Tom says the media doesn't write about this. Well, I wrote about it, and I wrote about it for our website, long pieces about how this is why it's one of the reasons why Donald Trump got elected. It's why Bernie Sanders almost got the nomination. These corporations in which these CEOs paid themselves $50 million golden parachutes and moved jobs to Mexico while, and cutting off jobs while giving themselves these great pay raises and firing all these people. I don't think that's very good. I think young people today have a very dim view of free market capitalism, free market. And this is one reason is the abuses in the private sector.
That's
okay.
We're talking about apples, Carl. That's not what we're talking about.
Tom, you brought it up. You said, wait. Tom,
I'm not disagreeing with you, Carl, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a manager asking employees, like, what are you doing? Like, what have you been doing last week?
Yeah.
Federal employees do not have, it shouldn't be.
Andy's lost total control of the show.
Well, that's okay.
I know. I'm going to ask you. I want to talk about.
Wait. These are not.
Shut off your mic, Carl.
These are not lifetime appointments. These civil service jobs, they shouldn't be seen that way. I get that. But when people work for you, you treat them with respect. That's my principle in the private sector or the public sector.
Yes,
and laying people off should be done in a humane way and for the right reasons in an organized way, and it should actually save money.
Okay.
And if you're not doing that, you're just being cruel.
Okay, but the question, let's talk about two things. First of all, the question of what you did in the last 5 days is, to me, seems a completely legitimate question that anyone evaluating the performance of an organization would ask. I do not understand why there's this huge, reaction to it. Plus, I just want to bring up the politics of this. Mark Penn, we all know, he's on Fox. He has a new poll, overwhelming support for cutting government spending. 70% say that waste, fraud, and abuse is a problem. Musk is about at even, he's about 50-50, but the mission that he's on, this is according to Penn, seems to Americans generally that it's something that needs to be done. And I think that relates in part, Carl, to the idea that everyone who's in the private sector, the rest of us, not the 2 points, are, we've lived through this. We've been laid off. We've had to, or if you're a manager, you've had to lay people off. It's painful, but it's a fact of life. It's part of the system that makes America. You cannot have a system where people just are employed for forever and there's no accountability.
Well, I agree with that, but I think, you guys, what you guys seem to be saying is that private sector people are treated crappy too. My response is I'm not in favor of that. I think workers should be treated with dignity and respect. And I don't mean to sound like a Marxist here, but
you sound a little bit like a Marxist.
Well, but look, laying people off, losing your job is a hard thing. Laying somebody off is a hard thing. This should be done as a last resort, and
Carl,
it shouldn't be done. I think that Elon Musk got the wrong lesson from Twitter. He bought this company. He got all this resistance from the liberals. He's restored free speech to this platform. I applaud that. But it turns out that was one of the great feather bedding companies of all time. He laid off all these people and was still able to turn out a good product. I don't know that that's true in all these government agencies. I suspect it isn't. But if it's going to be done, as I keep saying, it should be done through the channels with the managers, with the people who already know what these people are doing.
We're not saying that private sector employees are treated crappy, Carl. We're saying the inverse of that, which is federal employees should not be treated, somehow put on a pedestal or bubble wrapped because they can't answer an email that would literally take 2 seconds. In fact, it'd take 2 minutes. And in fact, someone actually on X used Grok, the AI that Elon Musk developed. It's typed in there, like, give me 5 things that I could say that I was doing and, no one would be able to verify. And it pumped out 5 things. And Elon Musk retweeted that and said, with like laughing about like, that's all it would take.
Oh, Elon Musk also tweeted out this meme of federal workers crying about Elon Musk and whining and stuff. He's shown contempt for the federal workforce, and you shouldn't pretend that that's
Carl,
not true.
This is the amount of like
contempt.
Bitching and moaning that has
showed.
Gone on over this email. If we had taken all of that stuff, all the time that it took for all the complaining about the email, we could have, every single employee could have written that email, and this would be a non thing. But apparently,
Tom, but I did it on Saturday on my own time.
Okay. Well, just so you know, Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, Darren Selnick, at the DOD said in a statement, when and if required, the department will coordinate responses to the email you have received. This is what he sent to people from the OPM. For now, please pause any response to the OPM email titled, "What did you do last week?" So
Tulsi Gabbard did something similar.
Yeah. Right. So there are people, Tom, I guess, just to point out that there are people within the bureaucracy who are pushing against this because they feel that it's somehow inappropriate.
Yeah, and well, inappropriate. I don't know that Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, her thing was, look, we don't want to be sending classified information around, right. and it said in the original email, don't send anything or any attachments that are classified. So, but understanding when you're asking people at the NSA or the CIA or these other agencies to tell you what you're, like, as Carl said, people at the Justice Department, they're working on confidential stuff they can't really say, and probably shouldn't say. So, in that sense, I agree. I think, there's a certain section of the federal workforce that probably should have been exempted from this, and they weren't. And so it's kind of taking place sort of piecemeal after the fact. And, maybe that's not the greatest thing. But at the same time, I don't think it's like such a huge thing that, it demonstrates why this was a horrible idea that people should have to answer, what they were doing.
I will go back to Carl just one more time. The idea that if you were McKinsey or you were going in and you were looking at an organization, this seems to me the kind of question you would ask. It just seems to me like a basic question. I don't understand why it is so offensive to you that someone would ask you or me or Tom or anybody in any organization, hey, what did you do for the last 5 days? So I would be able to answer that.
So if there was a hostile takeover of RealClearPolitics,
right,
and someone came in and asked me that question, I would answer them with choice Anglo-Saxon words.
You might not.
Here are your 5 things.
Transition. Yeah.
I would tell them 5 things they can do that are anatomically impossible.
All right. Well, on that note, we're going to take a break. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom Bevan and Carl Cannon, and we'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Carl Cannon and Tom Bevan. And Tom, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth fired the Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman, General Charles Q. Brown. Over the weekend, Trump is nominating Air Force Lieutenant General Dan Raising-Kane as the next JCS chair. Is this a just firing in your view? And what does it mean for the Pentagon?
I mean, it's completely a just firing in the sense that, all of these folks serve at the pleasure of the president. And this happens all the time when new administrations come in, they will clean house and fire generals. I mean, the unfortunate thing about this firing is that, folks, Democrats and the media, again, went out of their way to try and make this a race thing because he's African American. And, oh, Trump's firing. This is completely racist. Susan Glasser of the New Yorker, quoted someone who said this was only because he was black. And she tweeted that out or posted it on X, which is just shameful. It's shameful that the person said it. It's shameful that she actually repeated it and put it out there. I mean, Trump promoted Brown to the head of the Air Force during his first term in office. And so it's just, I think that was a really shameful effort to try and make this, the only reason. And again, there was no scandal. There was no, it wasn't like he was necessarily doing a bad job. I think he might have been too woke for the current administration. And that might have been what precipitated this, but it doesn't even matter. I mean, the president gets to, again, all of these folks serve at the pleasure of the president, and he wanted someone else. And now, Hegseth is carrying that out.
So Carl Hegseth said about this, he called Brown honorable, but he said, quote, he is not the right man for the moment. He didn't cite any specific deficiencies, which is, that is a little strange. And the thing about Brown is that after the 2020 murder of George Floyd, he did do this video where he spoke of his experience as a black pilot. And some people say this makes him a fodder for the Trump administration's war against DEI. Do you see it that way?
Well, yeah. And Pete Hegseth gave comments before he was Secretary of Defense at a time when he never thought he would be Secretary of Defense. And he named General Brown by name and used him as an example of, the military going woke. Now, over the weekend, Jane Fonda gave a speech and defined woke as being empathetic. Well, that's not what most Americans think. And of course, she was lit up on Twitter by people who showed her, in North Vietnam, literally hobnobbing with the enemy during Vietnam War. What woke means to people, and Andy, you cited this poll that Mark Penn did. The Trump administration's on solid ground here with the majority of the American people. It's teaching, quote, anti-racism at the service academies. It's elevating the principles of DEI throughout the Pentagon and the Defense Department, all four branches of the military. And I think this was a signal that Trump wants to put a halt to this. But, Martha Raddatz, who covers the military pretty extraordinarily well for ABC News, has been to all these wars, and she knows all these generals, the ones Trump fired, the ones he's hired. She brought out yesterday on ABC the problem with it, which is that these generals who are doing this, who are bringing the DEI principles or if you call it woke into the military, they were doing so at the behest of the Biden administration. They were following the civilian leadership of the military, which goes back to our founders. When you replace them, especially with a 3-star general, which was a surprise, a retired 3-star general.
Retired, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That sends the problem to me that I see is it politicizes the military in a way. People looking for future promotions are watching this and thinking, well, all right, what's the currency here? It's not just about war fighting; it's about these other things. And I think Tom's right. They certainly have the right to have. The president should have the commander of Joint Chiefs that he's comfortable with, no question. But what does it send? What's the message we're sending to the military ranks? And then if a Democrat succeeds Trump, is it going to reverse itself again?
That's what they do, Carl. Obama fired McChrystal. I mean, Biden replaced General. This is not some, out of the ordinary thing that's happening here.
It is out of the ordinary. It's not brand new, but this trend is relatively recent, Tom. And what I'm saying is,
Okay.
I think it's a little worrisome. I'm not trying to.
It didn't start with Trump, is what I think.
It didn't start with Trump, and I'm not going ape shit like I did over the Musk letter. I'm just raising this question.
Well, Tom, he also fired Admiral Lisa Franchetti as Navy chief. And that was sort of seen as, she really was viewed sort of as DEI hire. So that was, some people think it was sort of a closer call. But anyway, again, more evidence that he's sort of choosing people, put it in their terms, sort of on merit as opposed to DEI or quotas.
Look, Carl said he's worried about what signal it sends. I mean, this part of this is sending a signal that regime is over, and that there is a new regime which is going to focus on sort of making the military as lethal as it can be, right? Merit-based. We're not doing any of these extraneous things, that involve any of this DEI stuff. And so, I mean, that's part of what's going on here, and it's perfectly fine. I don't have a problem with it at all. President was elected. He's the commander in chief, so he has full authority to do what he wants in executing those duties, and so he can replace anybody he wants, for cause, not for cause. It doesn't really matter.
Well, Tom,
and I don't think
there's symbols here. The Maryland National Guard, saying it was responding to a Pentagon order, canceled a flyover of a Frederick Douglass celebration a couple weeks ago. So is that really what we're doing? Are we going down to this level? Because if you're gonna cancel a flyover of Frederick Douglass, maybe you shouldn't do flyovers of National Football League games. I mean, Frederick Douglass had played a heroic role in this country regarding the United States Army. He is personally convinced Abraham Lincoln to bring what then called colored troops into the Army, and it helped turn the tide of the war. So I understand you want the best people, but if you're going around systematically saying anything that celebrates Black History Month, anything, a woman gets promoted, we're going to assume that it's a DEI hire. The pendulum can swing too far pretty quickly if you're going down this road, I think. So again, I would urge caution.
Well, Tom, what do we know about Dan Raisin Kane? He's a pretty interesting fellow. He, as Carl pointed out, he's a 3-star general. He's retired and being brought back, that is different and a surprise.
We know Trump likes his name.
It's great.
Very similar to Jim Mad Dog Mattis. Trump, every time when he loved Mad Dog Mattis, he would always say his nickname. I think that's the same thing with Raisin Kane.
Well, until Maddox actually worked for him, then they
But he was also, look, he also came and was civilian, and so he's got a very unique story. And I read some sort of testimonials from people who worked with him and said he's an amazing guy. So again, I'm not willing to pronounce judgment on this being a great pick or not a great pick. Let's see what he does when he's in office. But Trump absolutely has the prerogative and the right to appoint him to be his most senior military advisor.
Yeah. Okay. Well, guys, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom Bevan and Carl Cannon. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom Bevan and Carl Cannon. And Carl, the White House is in this battle with the Associated Press after the news agency seemed to question the renaming of the Gulf of Mexico to be the Gulf of America. The White House has rescinded the AP's press pass in the briefing room. It seems retaliatory, especially after Caroline Leavitt's claim that free and independent media would be welcomed in to replace the Associated Press. You were head of the White House Correspondents Association at one point, so you have a perspective on this. What do you make of it?
Well, the Correspondents Association president wrote a letter objecting to it. Had I been the president, I would have had to do the same thing, the president of the association. You stick up for your members. Julie Pace, who's head of the AP, said that this was retaliatory and that it made no sense. It's completely improper for the White House to take it out on a reporter's covering the White House, a decision made about the AP style book, and she's right about that. She also said it's a clear violation of the First Amendment. I'm not so sure about that, to be honest with you. And we need to be careful in the media when we play that card. That's the nuclear option. We throw this word around promiscuously. I don't know that it's a violation of the First Amendment. It's a violation of the spirit of the First Amendment, but mostly it's a battle over what we were talking about before. It's a battle over this, I know my friends don't like the word woke, but that's what we're talking about. The idea is that the AP style book has become woke, and there's no question on some issues it has, especially transgender issues. And, the AP presents itself what it always was for 100 years, very neutral, almost bland, what it used to be, because it was just the facts, ma'am. But in the new, it's not that way anymore, and they're asked to make judgments, and the AP is, believe me, they get it from the other side more than they get it from the conservative side. The officials who are in charge of this, the editors, they try to walk this middle ground. They don't always do it. And what the Trump administration is saying is this is aimed at AP, and they know what they're doing, and it's aimed at part of the AP style book.
Yeah. So Tom, I mean, people, our listeners and viewers may not really fully understand the AP style book and the power it has within our world of journalism, but it is the go-to place when you're writing a story. If you want to know what to call a country or what to call a Gulf, or
whether capitalize the word president, it's all this things,
right.
punctuation,
numbers, it's all, yeah, it's the Bible
usage.
exactly.
It's the Bible. And
everybody who's hired in an editorial or copy position, right? Copy editing, they'll ask you have to be familiar with the AP style book.
Well, we send it to when we hire an editor reporter, I send them the AP style book. So it's ubiquitous.
So that is the context in which this is all taking place, because I think that
over the Gulf of Mexico.
Well, yes, right.
America.
But, for example, the decision whether to capitalize black is something that the AP weighed in very quickly on. And if I commend people to reading the Wall Street Journal, there's an article by James Toronto about this. But the idea is the AP style book does sort of change, and when it changes something, it's a big deal. So when they do or do not sort of adopt sort of a woke thing, which they seem to have done with transgenderism, it matters. Now, that's one question. The question that I have is whether the White House should be weighing in or denying access based on something like this, or whether that's out of their control.
You said that they had revoked their White House press pass. I'm not sure that's completely true. I know they were banned from the pool, I think, which is, they've been a part of for a long time. But I think that AP reporters are still sitting in the White House press briefings.
Yeah. The White House pool, take 1 second, Tom, explain our listeners. Okay. So there's a pool of reporters anywhere the White House goes. It's called a pool because it's a group, 3 wire services, a print reporter, a television, a radio, and a sound person, photographer. And they have to share, if there's a closed event, they have to share that information with the rest of the press corps in what's called a pool report. So I think what AP was kicked out of the White House pool rotation.
I think they've rescinded. I mean, we will have to check this, but I think they rescinded their press pass. But go ahead anyway.
We will have to check that because that's, look, when Barack Obama did this to Fox News back in his time, I mean, there was an uproar about it. Look, let's just establish some things that have already been discussed. The AP is, I think, although they present themselves as neutral and objective, they are, in fact, they lean to the left. And in the stories that they choose, the headlines they choose, the pictures they choose, the way they frame stories, they are left leaning. And I document that stuff all the time on my X feed because I go to these websites every morning and I see, and by the way, it's the AP stuff is reprinted in hundreds, thousands of papers across the United States and all around the globe. And so when they put a certain title or a certain picture with a story, it carries some power in terms of what the news consuming public sees. And so That's all true. I but I also think this is kind of needlessly petty on the part of the Trump administration and the White House to sort of, put this, stake in the ground that they have to say, I mean, who cares? I mean, honestly, it's like some people have decided they're going to use the Gulf of America and that's great, but for Trump to be, sort of driving this, it turns the AP into a martyr almost. It makes them the victim here, when in fact, if Trump didn't do that and they just let the AP go on and do what they normally do, the AP is not a victim. They're actually they're seen, I think, by the majority of the American people as an organization that has lost a lot of trust.
Yeah. Well, we could talk about the AP more, but I do want to talk about Joy Reid. Tom, I want to give you an opportunity here. Her show was canceled by MSNBC. It's been on the air for 5 years. What's going on? Why was it canceled?
Again, that depends on who you talk to, but her ratings were not good. I mean,
Right.
59,000 people in the 18 to 20 from 25 to 54 demo. And she was, I think, among the lowest rated of their lineup, and their lineup is lower rated than certainly less than CNN and certainly less than Fox News. So look, I'm not in the habit of dancing on people's graves or celebrating, but in this, I'll make an exception here. No, look, I will just say that Joy Reid was one of the worst, most racially divisive. I mean, if you tuned into her program and you listened to her show, it was always, everything was about race filtered through that lens, and how, obviously Republicans and the Trump administration and white people in general were terrible and awful, and society was just horribly racist. I mean, it was a really sort of dour outlook, and so I'm not sad that she's not going to be part of the media landscape anymore.
Carl, we have a few minutes left here on this segment. Joy Reid, MSNBC, what do you make the future of the
Well,
network?
she's not a journalist, but her ad hominem style of discourse, I think, is unhelpful.
Mm.
And I'm on, I don't, unless we're talking about Elon Musk and DOGE, I guess I don't talk that way. But um, but
Your exception is Elon Musk.
well, I thought that memo was awful. I don't criticize Elon Musk in a personal way, or I try not to. I've said, well, look, we all say intemperate things. I said, I called Eric Swalwell names last week. I shouldn't have done that. That's not.
It's okay, Carl.
No, but it's not really the right way to do discourse.
Mm-hmm.
Tom said something about AP, though. He said, in fact, it leans to the left. Now, if I was editing that piece, I would take out in fact, because it's actually one of my pet peeves. People say in fact and then give something that's obviously an opinion. And sometimes people say, in fact, my view is that. Okay, I guess that is your view. But the AP, they think of themselves as this arbiter, and they think of themselves in the middle. And so we should remember, if you don't think they're in the middle, maybe you're not in the middle, and maybe they aren't, but a lot of these calls are subjective. So after the George Floyd thing, Andy, you mentioned to capitalize the word black, and people, and it's a little jarring because you've never seen it that way, but Negro used to be capitalized, the word colored wasn't. White people aren't. The Washington Post confronted this, and people said, well, black, and some days black and white in the same sentence, and white would not be capitalized. So they started capitalizing the word white, which I'll never get used to. It's like I'm reading a white supremacist literature,
right?
Because the Nazis, the neo-Nazis, the Ku Klux Klan always capitalized the word white. These things are very difficult calls, and I just I don't think we should just assume people are always going to get it just the way we want it. But I think most people are trying to get it right. But some of these things, capitalize black journalists. The Black Journalists Association wrote to the AP and said, this is important. Black's not just a color, it's a culture. It should be capitalized. So I think people are trying to make their calls. And I just think Donald Trump, he's the president of the United States. He's got all this job. Now he wants to be head of the Kennedy Center, apparently mayor of Washington, head of the PGA Tour. Now he wants to be, run the AP style, but he's got a lot.
And he wants to be Postmaster General.
And Postmaster General. I sometimes, I want to say to him, hey, do less. You've got a big job.
All right. Well, we've only got a minute left here. I'm going to just say that Carl pointed out that her viewership, we're talking about Joy Reid, 59,000 in the 25 to 54 demographic. Laura Ingraham, her competitor on Fox, 389,000 viewers in that demographic. And to some extent, this is just a business decision. I mean, you cannot run a network that is losing viewers the way MSNBC has been losing viewers. They've got to do something. So,
but to
Carl,
what? But
Tom, you
this
got
is
1
not,
minute.
this is not a situation where MSNBC is doing this because they think they're going to put on a program that's more centrist or less racially divisive, maybe. I mean, they're replacing her with a panel of Simone Sanders and Michael Steele, the former RNC
Right.
chairman, and I think like a Latina. And so it's going to be just as sort of left wing as Joy Reid's show. Now, whether
Well,
they
we'll
can
see. We'll
get
see,
better
Tom.
ratings or not, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. Okay. Well, guys, we're going to take a little break here. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom Bevan and Carl Cannon. And when we come back, Tom is going to talk to Susan Crabtree. Don't go away.
Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of RCP, joined now by Susan Crabtree. She's one of our national political reporters and has a story on RCP today about, and was one of the first to break the news, that Dan Bongino is going to be the deputy director of the FBI. Susan, welcome to the show. Always good to have you.
Thanks for having me again. Great to be with you.
This pick caught a lot of people, by surprise. In some ways, I would even say came out of the blue. Did you have any sense that this was happening? I know you cover the Secret Service a lot, and you're very well sourced with the Secret Service, and Bongino used to be in the Secret Service. But were you as shocked by this news as the rest of us were?
I was shocked by it, but it was something lingering out there. It was this sort of, Dan did not seem like he was satisfied with not getting the Secret Service director position. He has said on his show multiple times that he didn't want it because he was happy in the private sector, but if called by President Trump to do something in the administration, he would do that. And he said this morning on his show that it was the biggest honor of his life to do this. So, but there was all this intrigue since Donald Trump's victory that Dan Bongino would get the Secret Service position, and he has been critical of Sean Curran for that decision by Trump to choose Sean Curran, and he's been very vocal about that, but he said he wishes him the best. But in this position, he is going to have a chance to do what he has wanted to do, what he's been suggesting as the biggest reform, and strip the Secret Service of their investigations. They're basically more than 50% of their manpower goes to investigating counterfeit, financial crimes, even child trafficking. And he says that that's just redundant with what the FBI already has done. And so they should focus on their protective mission and keeping Donald Trump alive and the first family and the VP and cabinet members. So I think this is going to give him an opportunity to enact that change if he is as influential as people are making him out to be with his close friendship with Kash Patel.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about. I mean, we've got Kash Patel now, who in and of himself was, I think, a shock to the system for a lot of establishment Washington, folks on the Democratic side of the aisle. And now here you have, sort of, if Kash Patel is Batman, Dan Bongino is Robin, the dynamic duo here. And I saw the clip of Dan Bongino talking about he's going to give everything he had to over the next however long to this agency. I mean, what do we expect? First of all, what's the reaction you're hearing from folks inside Washington to the Bongino news? And then what can we expect from the two of these gentlemen as they move forward? What's on the top of their priority list in terms of making moves at the FBI?
Yes, I think that you have gotten the requisite sort of predictable criticism from the left that, he doesn't have enough. Usually the pick comes from within the agency and it's a long-term agent who has moved up the ladder. That's not what Donald Trump is signaling he wants for that agency. He wants a real shakeup. He wants to clean house. He's already begun that process even before Kash Patel was installed. And so now you're going to see this very, very aggressive pursuit of reform at the FBI, and it could, like I said, spill over to the Secret Service as well. With the FBI, certainly from my point of view, I really want to see him tackle what's going on with the FBI investigation into the would-be assassins, Thomas Crooks and Ryan Ruth. We have not seen very much from that. I felt like it was a black box in many ways. The FBI was containing the information, especially about Thomas Crooks and his encrypted apps. I want to see that cracked wide open. We need to know if they were acting alone. I don't think there's a lot of suspicion that that's not the case. So let's find out. I'll go where the story leads. And the other issues if you know anything about Dan Bongino, he's written several books about, one being Spygate. He is very upset, was very upset, and talked to his viewers a lot about the Russia hoax, if you want to call it that, the investigation, and how it was funded and how it was carried out during the first year of the Trump administration and afterwards. And he's also deeply concerned about how the president was impeached the first time and the issues with the leaks that led to that impeachment of the phone call with Zelensky and Ukraine, and how the money is being spent. So I think that's what will be his focuses at the FBI. But he also made it known very clear that he wants to make sure, first and foremost, that the homeland is secure, and he will do everything in his power to do that as a former federal law enforcement officer. He was a NYPD officer first, then Secret Service officer.
We're speaking with Susan Crabtree, national political reporter for RealClearPolitics, talking about Dan Bongino, who's been appointed deputy director of the FBI. Susan, we got just a couple of minutes left, and you talked about the sort of black box, and this is one of across agencies the Trump administration has promised, quote unquote, radical transparency. Right? They're gonna do everything from, if you believe Trump, he's going to Fort Knox with Elon. They're going to open that up. They're going to they're releasing the files on JFK, Martin Luther King, et cetera, et cetera. But oftentimes, folks go into these agencies with the best of intentions, and then for whatever reason, maybe it's because of the classified nature of the information itself, maybe it's because the institution, circles the wagons or whatever, we don't always get, and people don't always live up to these promises that they're going to, let sunlight shine in and give the American people the truth. Is this different? Does it feel different? Or do you think what's going to be that the administration is going to fall short of those promises of transparency?
Well, I think if anyone can do it, to provide the transparency, is Kash Patel with Dan Bongino as a dynamic duo. Kash Patel was very instrumental when he worked for the Intelligence Committee on the House side. Devin Nunes is the chair, to expose some of the schemes, I guess that's the only word I can call them, to link Donald Trump to Russia and say that Russia was influencing the 2016 campaign. And the way that they went about it, to get the false FISA court documents to surveil different members of the Trump campaign's team, was just unprecedented. And I think you're going to see a lot of FISA reform and a lot of efforts to crack down on those that perpetrated those acts. And people say that that's a partisan issue. Well, I think the FBI has lost a lot of credibility over the last few years during the Biden administration and before that. And I think they are dedicated to cleaning it up. We'll see if they can measure up to those very tall orders.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Susan Crabtree with RealClearPolitics. Susan, thanks for your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, and that's going to do it for us. On behalf of Andy and Carl, I'm Tom Bevan. You've been listening to RealClearPolitics on SiriusXM. We'll see you back here tomorrow night. Everybody have a great night.